Hey everyone, Kevin here, and welcome back to my channel. So, to all the instructional designers out there, you're going to inevitably get asked questions in interviews about subject matter experts, and you're going to have to work with them all the time too. Now, I've covered the topic of SMEs a long time ago, but questions that I keep seeing pop up among career transitioners are: how much should I involve SMEs in the course design process? And how do I manage a difficult SME? These are very common questions and ones you're going to need to answer not only for other people, but for yourself, especially if you're a freelancer who totally relies on those SMEs for your paycheck. Plus, it's just a good idea to keep good relationships with them in general due to how much you're going to be working with them in the long run. But to answer those questions, because I've been asked them a lot since I started helping people move into the L&D industry, such as transitioning teachers, I'll first begin with the level of involvement your SMEs should have during course design. Now, there are actually two answers to this question: the real answer and the political answer. In other words, there's my answer and there is the company's answer. To me, though, SMEs are there for content and content only. They play a role in narrowing down the training problem during the analysis phase of ADDIE and then providing the information I need to create the course, video, or job aid to rectify that identified problem. My role as an ID is to create learning experiences using that material, which are educational, interactive to some degree, and which leads to lasting changes on the job. If SMEs could present content this way on their own, then our job wouldn't exist. Plus, we have to admit that SME isn't even a job title anyway, because it's just something people do in addition to their ordinary job. They're always going to provide feedback and suggestions on things, and your job sometimes is kind of just to smile and nod. Sometimes they make good points, but overall, you should only really care about the content they provide to you. The more political company type answer is that you have to follow whatever process they provide. Now, most will give their L&D staff a pretty blank check on how to do this, but some will have specific processes at each step of the way to make sure that everyone has a say. My previous position at Cruise, for instance, had a type of this where at routine intervals and after the alpha and beta phases, we had to give SMEs and stakeholders a few days to review everything, leave comments, and then we had to action that feedback. I do find some value in that, especially in industries where content can rapidly change, thus ensuring that no one wastes time and money creating courses with very outdated information. But that being said, it does get tiresome to do this and can lead to longer development times. Well, that and the constant back and forth can fray people's patience too. There is a rather significant balancing act between your role as an ID and that of the SMEs. They provide what you need, but at the same time, you need to define your role as the one who designs, develops, and administers that content, not them. And all that leads into the other common question of how to manage a SME who is difficult or who wants to be more involved in the design and development process than they really need to. Again, this depends on you and the company's style, but there are strategies you can use to deal with such situations. If you have an overzealous SME who wants to get involved but is kind of getting in the way, you can erroneously place an error in your work to give them something to focus on. That may seem disingenuous, but you are giving the SMEs something to be involved with during the design process in a very low risk and constructive way. Through this method, everyone gets what they want and there's no real harm done. Sometimes a white lie is a good thing. If, on the other hand, though, you have a non responsive SME who you really need to get in touch with, you need to remember that, again, being a SME isn't their day job. They have a lot of work to do, and it's necessary in these situations to be accommodating of their schedule before yours. Find when they're free and purposefully schedule meetings during those times, even when it's not really convenient for you. I've had to do that a number of times as someone who is in a different time zone than virtually all of my SMEs. It is just a part of the job that we have to deal with sometimes. Now, if things continue along this vein and you are still unable to get an answer from that SME, then you would need to either find an alternate one at the company or throw your project manager in to have their weight get you an answer because your deadlines will get held up if they don't get the help you need. Obviously, do that sparingly because it can lead to an even more adversarial relationship down the line. It's an option, but definitely shouldn't be your first one. It's also telling if you can ask this question first in an interview. Instead of waiting to see if they asked me how I personally manage SMEs, I asked interviewers how the team manages their SMEs and how they say no to training requests. That way, you find out if they have a problem with this out of the gate and how they handle those situations before you ever want to work there. If they don't really have an answer or give one that you don't agree with, then you probably don't want to work for them anyway because SME and stakeholder management is kind of bread and butter to being a good instructional designer. Don't be afraid to ask them how they handle those problems and let that guide your responses as well. Use your resources and get the most complete picture that you can. No matter what happens, remember that SMEs are vital to our jobs. We are not SMEs on practically anything. And that's a big thing I had to remind teachers transitioning into the field too, because they came from an environment where they were the SMEs in their classrooms. It's one of the bigger hurdles to overcome, actually. But basically, treat them well, involve them where you can, but remember that it is your job to design, develop, and distribute e-learning. Stick to your role there and keep providing quality content. Doing so will also reassure stakeholders that you know what you're doing and they don't need to look over your shoulder as much. It's a tough topic, and one that will be an everlasting one in our line of work, but you'll get the hang of it in the long run. But well, guys, that's it for today. Thanks for listening, and please don't forget to click like and subscribe to see more of my content. Until then, though, I will see you in the next video.